Hey there, have you ever contemplated what's the meaning of life? Why are you here? And does existence serve a purpose? Well, Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning emphasizes that life has a meaning and an ultimate purpose. And it's our responsibility to figure out what is it that brings meaning to our lives. Because during the times of hardships, it's only the sense of meaning that's going to help us persevere. And he reminds us of a quote by Nietzsche which says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." The book Man's Search for Meaning was first published in 1946, and by the year 1997, 10 million copies of this book were sold, and it was translated into 24 different languages. The author of the book, Viktor Frankl, was an Austrian psychiatrist and neurologist, and he was also a Holocaust survivor. He spent 3 years in the Nazi concentration camp, specifically in Auschwitz and Dachau. So this book is split into two parts. The first part talks about his life in the concentration camp, and he gives a psychological analysis of the prisoners in the camp, the SS guards who handled these prisoners, and the capos. Now, capos are the prisoners who were assigned the job of supervising other prisoners. And part two of this book talks about this therapeutic technique developed by Viktor Frankl himself. It's called Logotherapy. And Logotherapy is oriented towards helping individuals find personal meaning in life and to give them the strength to endure hardships and suffering, which is an inevitable part of every human's life. This book was able to create such a huge impact in so many lives that it's considered as one of the most influential books of the 20th century. Now, in the book, Frankl shares the view that no matter how hostile your circumstances might be, you always have the freedom to make a choice. You can act in accord to the influences of your circumstances, or you can take a stand and resist these driving forces. And he shares the example of some of the prisoners from the concentration camp who did things like consoling their fellow prisoners or giving away the last piece of bread that they had to someone else. Now, these prisoners were exceptional because the emotion that dominated the minds of the majority of the prisoners was apathy and indifference, because all they might have thought is that we're only about to live for a couple of days, so why does anything matter anymore? Now, what made these handful of prisoners act differently was the result of an inner decision that they made, and that was to serve others during their time in captivity. And by doing so, they were able to find meaning in life, even in a place like a concentration camp. And that's exactly what the author says, that we all have the power to make such choices in life. So in other words, Viktor Frankl believed in the notion of free will, and this was quite interesting for me because in the previous book review that I did, which was Free Will by Sam Harris makes the claim that there is no such thing as free will. Now, both these ideas are contradicting, and at the same time they are convincing as well. Another interesting observation that Viktor Frankl makes in this book is the connection between hope and the immunity of the body. He noticed that majority of the prisoners who died in the camp because of ailment, the cause of their death was not their medical condition, but the psychological conditioning that they had. The moment these individuals lost hope in the future, so did their bodies, and eventually they died. Now, Frankl also went through the same hell the rest of the prisoners did in the camp, but what kept him going was that he had this sense of purpose. While he was struggling to survive in the camp, he visualized himself standing in front of a huge audience and giving a lecture on psychology and sharing his experience in the concentration camp. Now, this mental image itself helped him to rise above the suffering that he experienced in that moment in the camp. Frankl also talks about how time passed for a prisoner in the camp. He mentions that a single day in the camp felt as if it's never going to end, whereas a week in the camp passed very quickly. So time behaved in a very paradoxical manner for a prisoner. Now, in the second part of this book, Frankl talks about logotherapy in light of the experiences that he had in the concentration camp. And he mentions that majority of the individuals, not just in the camp, but in the world in general, experience this sense of meaninglessness in life. And he calls it existential vacuum. Now, from a psychological perspective, this state of mind is considered as an ailment. But when I got to talk to a person who has spent his whole life meditating and seeking higher consciousness, what he said was that this realization that there is no meaning to life is actually an awakening to truth. Because if you think about it, there is no meaning to life. You were born and you die. So what he said was to accept the fact that there is no meaning to life, and from that point of acceptance, you need to figure out what could you do to add meaning to your life. And his suggestion was to spend your life in a way by which you could serve others and serve the world. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that's going to bring meaning to your life. And setting money, power, or fame as your prime goal is not going to fulfill you in the long run. And I do believe what he said is true. Alright, so the core message of this book is that rather than expecting something out of life, you need to shift your perspective and ask yourself, what could life expect out of you? You are here and you have a role to play, a responsibility to fulfill. You need to figure out what that is and live up to it. Alright, so that concludes the review of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I hope this video was informative, and if you liked the video, do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to get a copy of this book, I've shared a link down in the description. You can check it out. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll be back again with another book review. Until then, bye, take care, and have a wonderful day.